Management of Acute Liver Failure by Dr. Kingshuk Das. And to chair this session, we have two stalwarts of Southeastern Railway, whom we all must already be knowing. That is Dr. K.B. Shaha, who is our Additional Chief Medical Director of Southeastern Railway, graduated from Calcutta Medical College and did his post-graduation in Occupational Health and Health Management and presented a number of national and international scientific papers in different conferences. I welcome you, sir. We have with us Dr. Mrs. Anjana Malhotra to co-chair this session, who also is one of the stalwarts of the Indian Railways. She is presently the Secretary of Plastic Surgeons of West Bengal Association, and she has conducted a number of conferences, and she has been the organizing secretary of the annual conference of Plastic Surgeons of West Bengal, which was held here in March 2012, and conducted a number of workshops on nasal reconstruction, ear reconstruction, and name what you please. And she has attended a number of smile surgery workshops all over the world. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you. I welcome Dr. Kingshuk Das, who is a renowned senior consultant in gastroenterology in the city of Calcutta and at present attached to Ruby General Hospital. He will speak on management of acute liver failure. So Dr. Kingshuk Das, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just give me 2 minutes time. I'm really thankful to the organizing committee for inviting me to talk on this subject. Although it's through a company case, but it's always happened like that. See, whatever I have heard over the last 4 talks, it's a fantastic academic knowledge and is a beautiful, very high-level discussion here. And what Aurobindo has said, that it must be very easy to run behind a girl whom you want to kiss. It's easier to do that than trying to talk over here in such an august gathering. What I was thinking, ভালো হবে না ভাই পয়েন্টটা কিছু আছে দেখুন একটা বেটার পয়েন্ট আছে Okay, whenever I talk on this subject, I say you know, all of you know this gentleman, and this person goes and says drugs on the pitch will help the first bowlers, but he knows at the end of the match he may be absolutely wrong. And when you get a patient of acute liver failure, in your ICU or ICU or in your emergency, you start thinking that possibly you'll have the same fate what this gentleman had few years or few decades back. And that's why you have to exercise your brain, and a lot of you do a brain gym exercise knowing that this is going to change or do something in your next part. There is a huge discussion throughout the world what we should do for acute liver disease, acute liver failure, although it's relatively new term. A lot of discussion on etiology and natural history, be it outside India or throughout the country. And when you decide about the treatment, how to treat, it's really a puzzle. And especially in our country life, it's really dicey because you don't have much of liver transplantation. If you look at the etiology of acute liver failure, then you start your journey and look at hepatitis B virus and its ancestors started infecting human beings when we started coming here in this world, that is 7 million years back. And as you see here, possibly hepatitis B was there. Now people say when the dinosaur era was there, so it started infecting, and then we are the third chimpanzee, we got infected. Now what is the relation with acute liver failure? Now I start always with the history, especially after Aurobindo Das, and especially in the evening when you start talking something and you feel sleepy, you should always have slides like that. And then you see people started moving outside the continents. And where we came from, where we went, we carried the hepatitis B virus with us. And as you see, when you started moving to the new continents, you carried the virus along with you for last more than 50,000 years. And that, you know, is one of the most important cause of acute liver failure. If you look at the pyramidal era or Egyptian era, you can't see that there was not much of obesity at that era. But you have doctors of various around. You have Galgen of Venice there, but there is no mention of liver failure related disease or what are the drugs or indigenous medicine which work on liver failure. If you come to the Babylonian era, the power of divination was given to liver. In fact, liver was thought to be the seat of soul. Your body has so many organs, and all organs have different souls. And all souls fight like we fight in our department, in institute, in hospital, in nursing home. Similarly, they used to fight, and you think that someone will win, and power of divination was given to liver. Now, when you look at Hippocrates, 460 BC, she described a person who barked like a dog, could not be held, and said things could not be comprehended. That was the classical first description of hepatic encephalopathy in this world. And after that, you know, Shakespeare started writing one of his friend in his story. He started to drink, and he talked that Shakespeare said, "Wit does some harm to my wit, protein exacerbating your hepatic encephalopathy." So that means hepatic encephalopathy is quite old in our story, and Caesar Sherlock subsequently described what is this. This is nothing but just a cytokine storm. As you see in sepsis, as you see in acute pulmonary, acute lung injury or any other disease, you have a cytokine storm, and here is a cytokine storm in acute liver injury. You know, all of damage, lot of damage, and then there is a damage in the liver. Your whole liver architecture goes out. You lose your liver cells, and that's why there is really a fight between liver degeneration and liver degradation. Now, liver degeneration is more, and that causes, and temporarily faster than the degeneration. That's why you lose the ball, you lose your whole liver like this, and the patient dies of liver failure. I obviously remember those days of Professor Mehta, who started doing gastroenterology in our country when I was born in '64. And Professor Bilawal started university in this country in 1980s, early 80s, and he was these two were the teachers which I remember, and especially non-talk, I always show them. If you really look, what is the lasting acute liver failure? Because it's a very short time, in 20-25 minutes, it's very difficult to discuss. So I'll be touching on what has come in 2011 update, and that's very important. Is Larson, Lee, and Todd, they have really discussed this in great detail. If you go through the top of 2009, the Hayase, he says this is quick and they can. That means the acute liver failure comes, as you see in dengue, throughout the city now you find so many dengue, and the people dies because of shock as well as the thrombocytopenia, and sudden liver failure. The liver enzymes, you know, gets 7,000, 12,000, 14,000 SGPT, and patient dies within 4 hours. The classical acute liver failure by dengue. What you will learn? Will learn, be able to make the diagnosis of acute liver failure, etiology and severity assessment, initial support, understand when and how to transfer the acute liver failure patient for transplant. I will not be discussing transplant today at all, but these are the issues when you should decide, and if your facility is available, hope so, by another 5-10 years you will be free liver transplant in this city. So the definition is that illness has to be less than 6 months, the clinical syndrome of liver dysfunction, the coagulopathy INR should be equal to or more than 1.5, encephalopathy has to be there. Mind that your jaundice may not be there. So you have a patient in your emergency who has a coagulopathy, encephalopathy, altered sensoria, and you may not have jaundice, still this person can have an acute liver failure. No pre-existing cirrhosis except Wilson's, autoimmune hepatitis, and vertically acquired chronic hepatitis B infection. The other names are gone: pulmonary liver failure, hyperactive liver failure, subacute liver failure. These are no more entertained now. The etiologies, if you follow the mnemonics, as we learned 30 years back in your studies A, B, C, D, E, then you see acetaminophen, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, Bichieri, cryptogenic, hepatitis D, pregnancy, and all those. If you really differentiate India and West, in India, acute viral hepatitis is more than 90%, and hepatitis E is 40%, B is around 25%. Don't forget the other viral etiology. It can be extremely virus, varicella zoster, herpes simplex, cytomegalo, transmission related, and dengue virus. So whenever you get a acute liver failure, you always say the virus is, there is no etiology. No. If you don't get the other etiologies that will come, then you look for these etiologies. One of them may be present. In West, paracetamol is 50% and viral is only 10%. As you see, this is acetaminophen in West, and there must be some other unknown etiology in their country also. They have one common etiology is drug-induced liver injury other than acetaminophen also, and they define as predefined biochemical criteria. The ALT more than 5 times upper limit of normal. In 2 occasions, alkaline phosphate is more than 2 times. And please keep in mind, now SGPT normal level has been brought down in male to 30 and female to 90. This is more or less accepted throughout the world since 2005. Our lab report gives 40 is the upper limit, but please look at the baseline of that gentleman whom you are treating for any other disease other than liver failure also. In your routine practice, if your SGPT 25 is normal or 30 is normal for male, and for female it's 90. Don't forget those levels. The best predictors of spontaneous survival and need for liver transplant is the underlying etiology. So look for etiology, and etiology. The cause of death in ALF, everyone knows. I'm not going into detail. Cerebral edema, sepsis, multi-organ failure, coagulopathy, metabolic acidosis, and dyslipidemia. And that's why you need to keep this patient in ICU. The hyperacute liver failure, acute liver failure are much better than the subacute liver failure, although the subacute is going. But in this group, you have greatest risk of cerebral edema, but greatest chance of spontaneous survival. So if you get a person who has developed a jaundice or prodrome just 5 days back and encephalopathy grade 4 in your OPD or emergency, you know that this patient still has a chance of survival. But a person who is on ATT has developed a jaundice after 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks after ATT and a bilirubin of 20 and an encephalopathy, you know you are going to lose this patient until unless you have a liver transplant. The survival in 1970s was 20% and now it's more than 70% with liver transplant. To know that if the number of organs involved, organ failure increases, the mortality also increases in this group of individuals. The post-transplant 1 year survival is more than 70. Spontaneous survival is better, 60% in HIV, paracetamol and shock, and poor in drug-induced liver injury, autoimmune hepatitis and idiopathy. These are spontaneous survival. The history is very important, as I said. You can have a pregnancy with fatty liver, you can have a medication, you can toxin exposures, mushroom poisoning, any sexual history you must need to take and travel for the Western people who get the infection from our country and dies of acute liver failure. This you don't need to read. You must keep in mind, jaundice may be absent, jaundice is often but not always seen at presentation. You can have a large liver or small liver, and that's very, very important. But at emergency or your clinic, you must rule out acute or chronic liver failure. This is absolutely different by prognosis to acute liver failure. Acute or chronic liver failure is worse. If you first get a person like this in your OPD, that means it has a features of chronic liver disease, and on top of that there is acute infection or dyslipidemia or sepsis or anything which has caused acute liver failure. Now grades of encephalopathy, I'm not going into details. Always find that grade 3 and grade 4 are worse. Now low grade encephalopathy is considered as grade 0 and 1, and high grade is grade 2, 3, 4. Now 3 and 4 are worse because you get a lot of cerebral edema there. If you just take an example of a patient, I'm not going into case history as Dr. Arvind has discussed with you all. Now, this is a 35 years old patient. 2 weeks of jaundice, albuminuria, no ethanol, no drugs, no sedation, no fever, no bleeding, no persistency, hypotensive in your emergency. There's just 3 emergency, high grade encephalopathy. Hepatomegaly, total count is carrying 18,200, bilirubin of 28, SGPT of 12, 25, INR of 3.8. So that is classical. If you get a bilirubin of this, and with this INR and encephalopathy, this is classical acute liver failure and creating of 2.96, who is going to be acute kidney injury. So this patient should not go to ward, straight away go to your intensive care unit. Now if you have a transplant facility, you need to talk to the transplant people or try to send this patient directly from there to the transplant unit. As I said, etiology is important because if you have a paracetamol, recently I had a patient who had ingested 40 paracetamol. Now you have to give NAC, N-acetylcysteine. I will discuss what. And mushroom poisoning, we have X-like penicillin and silimani, acute gut liver, pregnancy, delivery, herpes is lansaclobine, autoimmune steroid, but here in skips, and transplant only hope for Wilson's. In Wilson's, we don't have much drug for acute liver failure in Wilson's. I'm not going into details of initial lab, everyone knows all this, but please keep in mind, besides the INR, you have arterial blood gas, arterial lactate, acetaminophen level in case of suspicion, varicella zoster, herpes simplex virus, and then autoimmune markers and ceruloplasmin level. These are very, very important as a primary from your OPD or your emergency room. You do a chest X-ray, you do a ultrasound abdomen, do an echocardiography, non-personal CBC, rule out intracellular bleed, and send the surveillance or the blood urine and ETQ if it is on ventilator for culture. Why ultrasonography? Because mind that the presence of a nodular contour can be seen in acute liver failure because of very fast liver degeneration. The liver may look as nodular or wavy on ultrasound on day 2, 3, 4 of acute liver failure and should not misguide you as chronic liver disease. Try to look for diagnosis of hepatitis B. Some of the patient has come after few months and developed liver failure. If surface antigen is negative, you need to do an anti-HBC IgM to find that etiology of this patient. And you know, DNA is very, very important. You can come in mommy or anywhere to try to find out the mommy and see whether they were same thing here, DNA, you do a DNA and see whether hepatitis B was there. Now, if patient has come on day 3 with an acute liver failure with an SCBD of 10,000. Now, what is the diagnosis? SCBD of 10,000 on day 2, nothing but ischemia. So, ischemia of toxin, paracetamol, and hypotension, or ischemic liver injury is the cause. It comes in 2-3 weeks, will be viral. And viral are usually 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. It's not 7,000, 10,000. Now, why severity assessment is important? Depending on the severity, you need to do a transplant on this patient or tell the relatives what is the mortality. Now, everyone starts seeing this. See, INR is more than 7. These are, I'm talking about non-paracetamol poisoning, or INR more than 3.5, less than 10 years of age, more than 40 years of age. Jaundice showing couple of things more than 7 days, bilirubin more than 17.5, indeterminate etiology, and dragging this liver injury. These are the worst. Please keep in mind when these patients are taken for transplant or so, you don't need to give prophylactic FFP. These are habit in this city, especially in India, that INR is 1.8. You start giving prophylactic FFP. That is a criminal offense, let me tell you here. For last 7 years, it has been shown classically proven that there is no role of prophylactic FFP, even if your INR goes beyond 4 or 4.5. So that's very, very important, don't forget. Now, advantage is that if you know the etiology, you know that like acetaminophen, the hepatitis A, or the pregnancy, the mortality, the survival is high. 70%, 50-70% of them will survive. But if it is a Wilson's disease, survival is low, malignancy is very low, and hepatitis B is again 20% of them will survive without any transplant facilities. Therapy concentrates on 3 things. Acute loss of extracellular function, you have to supplement, the systemic inflammatory response, SARS-CoV-2, and multi-organ failure. So you need to handle multi-organ failure just like sepsis. Don't forget your treatment remains same. To treat multi-organ failure and 30% to 60% survival continuous. In absence of transplant, you will be successful. Now all of you know better than me in critical care how to manage multi-organ failure. But again, as Kwashini has said here, Dr. Malhotra was just senior to me in his college days, graduation days, and mean arterial pressure is 60, ideally more than 75, and the CVP is 10 and PCD is 25. All of you know. But mind that the cerebral perfusion pressure should be more than 60. As he said in abdomen, the abdominal perfusion pressure should be more than 60. Here also cerebral perfusion pressure more than 60. Limit rolling and limit structuring. That's when you transfer the patient to your transplant unit. When you are transferring from your ICU to a transplant unit, you prevent, because patient has to be shifted to a critical care ambulance. Limit rolling and limit structuring, they will increase the intracerebral pressure. You know that grade 2 encephalopathy, grade 3, you have a lot of metabolic encephalopathy, cellular blood flow is altered, there is a blood swelling, there is a less pressure. So that's the most important problem in managing intracranial pressure. I'm not going into details, but mind that improved intracranial pressure, intracellular pressure is the first sign of spontaneous recovery. What are the new things you have done for raised intracranial pressure? I'm not going into routine things, but 2 things are very, very important. These are HCT is normal as I've shown. You give a lot of lacturose, handle your gut. then you do intracranial monitoring, which is not pressure monitoring is not always done. Treat the seizures if the patient has seizures. There is no role of prophylactic anticonvulsants. Now, if this is very important. One, you give mannitol. I will tell you the dose. The other thing is that very important. You find a person who has acute liver failure and sodium is 120. You person believe, no, don't treat, this is 120, 122. We normally don't give hypertonic saline. But this is the situation in acute liver failure. Please treat hyponatremia very well. Now, if a person has a serum ammonia of more than 150, mind that serum ammonia less than 100 is okay. But it's going beyond 125 is bad, and going beyond 150 is really bad if the serum pressure is high. So ammonia is more than 150. The greater intensity of T24, acute renal failure, requiring vasopressure to maintain mean arterial pressure, the prophylactic induction of hypernatremia with hypertonic saline to a sodium level of 145 to 155 is very important. Problem in Calcutta, we don't have 30% hypertonic saline. In India also, I have asked all those cancer specialists that there is no availability of 30% hypertonic saline here. So what you do it 3% hypertonic saline and give them and do 4-hourly sodium. Give 50 to 20 ml per hour infusions, the syringe pump, and try to see what is the level of sodium. The other thing you can do, as I said, that treat ICP pupillary abnormalities with a mannitol 150 ml, 20%, or hypertonic saline, as I said. And last one is indomethacin. I don't try it, I don't give it. I always try with mannitol and hypertonic saline. Barbiturates and others are less used, hypothermia is less used. Do a lot of surveillance.